in which our happy couples learn that life is not easy, whether as newlyweds or as recent divorcees. Chapter 14. Levine had been married for 3 months. He was happy, but not at all in the way he had expected. At every step he found disenchantment with his old dream and a new, unexpected enchantment. He was happy, but having entered upon family life, he saw at every step that it was not what he had imagined. At every step he felt like a man who, after having admired a little boat going smoothly and happily on a lake, then got into the boat. He saw that it was not enough to sit straight without rocking. He also had to keep in mind, not forgetting for a minute where he was going, that there was water underneath, that he had to row and his unaccustomed hands hurt, that it was easy only to look at, but doing it, while very joyful, was also very difficult. As a bachelor, seeing the married life of others, their trifling cares, quarrels, jealousy, he used only to smile scornfully to himself. In his own future married life he was convinced there not only could be nothing like that, but even all its external forms, it seemed to him, were bound to be in every way completely unlike other people's lives. And suddenly, instead of that, his life with his wife did not form itself in any special way, but was, on the contrary, formed entirely of those insignificant trifles he had scorned so much before, but which now, against his will, acquired an extraordinary and irrefutable significance. And Levine saw that to arrange all those trifles was by no means as easy as it had seemed to him before. Though he had thought that he had the most precise notions of family life, he had, like all men, involuntarily pictured it to himself only as the enjoyment of love, which nothing should hinder, and from which trifling cares should not detract. He was supposed, as he understood it, to do his work and to rest from it in the happiness of love. She was supposed to be loved, and only that. But like all men who had forgotten that she also needed to work, and he was surprised at how she, this poetic, lovely Kitty, in the very first, not weeks, but days of married life, could think, remember, and fuss about tablecloths, furniture, mattresses for guests, about a tray, the cook, the dinner, and so on. While still her fiancé, he had been struck by the definitiveness with which she had renounced going abroad and decided to go to the country, as if she knew something necessary and, besides her love, could still think of extraneous things. This had offended him then, and now, too, her petty fussing had cares several times offended him. But he saw that she needed it, and loving her as he did, though he did not understand why, though he chuckled at those cares, he could not help admiring them. He chuckled at her arranging the furniture brought from Moscow, decorating her room and his in a new way, hanging curtains, assigning future quarters for guests. For Dolly, setting up quarters for her new maid, giving the old cook orders for dinner, getting into arguments with Agafia Mikhailovna, dismissing her from her charge of the provisions. He saw how the old cook smiled, admiring her and listening to her inexperienced, impossible orders. He saw how Agafia Mikhailovna thoughtfully and gently shook her head at the young mistress' new instructions in the pantry. He saw how extraordinarily sweet Kitty was when she came to him, laughing and crying, to tell him that the maid Masha kept treating her like a young girl, and because of it no one listened to her. It seemed sweet to him, but strange, and he thought it would have been better without it. He did not know that feeling of change she was experiencing after living at home, where she would sometimes want cabbage with kvass or sweets, and could not have either, while now she could order whatever she liked, buy heaps of sweets, spend any amount of money, and order any pastry she wanted. She now dreamed joyfully of Dolly's coming with the children, especially because she was going to order each child's favorite pastry, and Dolly would appreciate all her new arrangements. She did not know why or what for, but housekeeping attracted her irresistibly, instinctively sensing the approach of spring and knowing there would also be bad weather. She was building her nest as best she could, hastening both to build it and to learn how it was done. This trifling preoccupation of Kitty's, so opposite to Levine's ideal of the exalted happiness of the initial period, was one of his disenchantments. Yet this sweet preoccupation, the meaning of which he did not understand, but which he could not help loving, was one of his new enchantments. Their quarrels were another disenchantment and enchantment. Levine never imagined that there could be any other relations between himself and his wife than tender, respectful, loving ones. And suddenly, in the very first days, they quarreled, and she told him he did not love her, loved only himself, wept and waved her hands. This first quarrel occurred because Levine went to a new farmstead and came back half an hour late, having lost his way trying to take a shortcut. He was returning home thinking only of her, of her love, of his happiness, and the closer he came to home, the more ardent his tenderness for her grew. He rushed into the room with the same feeling, and even stronger than when he was gone, to the Sherbatskys to propose. And suddenly he was met with a sullen expression he had never seen in her. He wanted to kiss her, but she pushed him away. "What's the matter?" "You're having fun," she began, trying to be calmly venomous. But she no sooner opened her mouth than reproachful words of senseless jealousy, all that had tortured her during the half-hour she had been spending sitting motionless at the window, burst from her. Only then did he understand clearly for the first time what he had not understood when he had led her out of the church after the wedding. He understood not only that she was close to him, but that he no longer knew where she ended and he began. He understood it by the painful feeling of being split which he experienced at that moment. He was offended at first, but in that same instant he felt that he could not be offended by her, that she was him. In the first moment he felt like a man who, having suddenly received a violent blow from behind, turns with vexation and a desire for revenge to find out who did it, and realizes that he has been accidentally struck himself, that there is no one to be angry with, and he must endure and ease the pain. Never afterwards did he feel it so strongly, but this first time it took him long to recover. Natural feeling demanded that he vindicate himself, prove to her that she was wrong, but to prove that she was wrong would mean to upset her still more, and make the breach that had caused all the trouble still wider. One habitual feeling urged him to shift the blame from himself to her. Another, stronger one, urged him as quickly as possible, to smooth over the breach and keep it from growing bigger. To remain under so unjust an accusation was tormenting, but to hurt her by vindicating himself was still worse. Like a man suffering from pain while half asleep, he wanted to tear off, to throw away the sore spot, and coming to his senses, found that the sore spot was himself. He could only try to help the sore spot to suffer through it, and that he did. They made peace. Realizing that she was wrong, but not saying so, she became more tender towards him, and they experienced a new, redoubled happiness in their love. But that did not keep such confrontations from being repeated, and even quite frequently, for the most unexpected and insignificant causes. These confrontations also often took place because they did not yet know what was important for the other, and because during this initial time they were both often in bad spirits. When one was in good, and the other in bad spirits, the peace was not broken. But when both happened to be in bad spirits, confrontations occurred for such incomprehensibly insignificant reasons that afterwards they were simply unable to remember what they had quarreled over. True, when both were in good spirits, their joy of life was doubled, but all the same, this initial period was a difficult time for them. Throughout this time they sensed especially keenly the tension, the tugging to one side and the other, of the chain that bound them. Generally, that honeymoon, that is, the month following the wedding, from which by tradition Levine had expected so much, not only had no honey in it, but remained in both their memories as the most difficult and humiliating time of their life. They both tried equally in later life to cross out their recollections of all their ugly, shameful circumstances of that unhealthy time when they were rarely in a normal state, or rarely themselves. Only in the 3rd month of marriage, after their return from Moscow, where they had gone for a month, did their life become smoother. If you enjoy this format, please leave a like and subscribe and return tomorrow for the next chapter.